Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Alison Cray, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Sergeant Joshua Smith. We are honoured to acknowledge His Excellency Mr. Mark Mooley, Belgian Ambassador to Australia, His Excellency Mr. Roland van Roomertele, my apologies, Mrs. Mona van Weinsberger and the accompanying delegation. We are also honoured to acknowledge His Excellency Rahichiro Takahashi, Ambassador of Japan to Australia, and Mrs. Masako Takahashi and the accompanying delegation. We warmly welcome Mrs. Pauline Carmona, Acting First Assistant Secretary, Asia and Oceania Branch at the French Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors and students on behalf of the following schools. From New South Wales, Bilgola Plateau Public School and Mary MacKillop Catholic College, Warnervale. Please stand and join in singing the national anthem. Children, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Florist. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Flying Officer Colin Reginald Pickworth. Colin Reginald Pickworth was born on the 30th of June 1923 in Katoomba, New South Wales, the son of Sydney and Roma Pickworth. Pickworth lived in St Mary's in the western suburbs of Sydney, where he worked as an electrician. On the 7th of December 1941, the 18-year-old enlisted in the Royal Australian Air Force and began training as an air gunner. The following year, while he was training in Australia, he married Dorothy Robinson at Kurri Kurri. Pickworth was lucky to survive a nasty accident during his early training. When the plane in which he was a crew member crashed into a motor tender, one of his crewmates was killed. Pickworth and 8 others were injured. After completing his initial training in Australia, Pickworth embarked for overseas service. As part of the Empire Air Training Scheme, he was one of almost 27,500 Royal Australian Air Force pilots, navigators, wireless operators, gunners, and engineers who, throughout the course of the war, joined Royal Air Force squadrons or Australian squadrons based in Britain. Arriving in Britain, Pickworth was posted to No. 460 Squadron, Royal Australian Air Force. No. 460 Squadron would become the most highly decorated Australian squadron in Bomber Command, and the squadron that suffered the highest casualties. Flying twin-engined Vickers Wellington medium bombers and then 4-engined Avro Lancaster heavy bombers, the squadron lost over 1,000 men. Australian, British, Canadians, New Zealanders, and South Africans. Almost 600 Australians from 460 Squadron are listed here on the Roll of Honour. On the night of the 2nd of January 1942, the Lancaster, in which Pickworth was the air gunner, took off from Royal Air Force Binbrook to take part in a large raid on Berlin. Just after takeoff, Pickworth's Lancaster, fully laden with bombs for the mission ahead, banked sharply and dived uncontrollably into the ground, exploding on impact. Pickworth and all 6 of his fellow crewmates were killed. Australians Flight Lieutenant Barrington Knivet, Flight Sergeant John Farthing, Flight Sergeant Henry Gill, Flight Sergeant Julian Dobinson, and Pilot Officer Edwin John Ross, and British Flight Engineer Sergeant Ronald Trett. At home in Australia, Colin's mother received the last letter from her son on the 3rd of January. She later said that it was quite a cheerful letter, but at the end of it he had written, "Well, folks, this is it." A few days later, I learned he had been killed over Germany. Allowing for time differences, she calculated that she had read her son's letter at almost the hour of his death. Colin Pickworth was just 20 years old. His name appears on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Flying Officer Colin Reginald Pickworth, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over, but in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial, and we wish you all a very good evening.